Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. As Robin said, I'm originally from the UK, so here is a picture of the UK. You guys are all quite familiar with that, I'm sure. I am from the city of Birmingham, not Birmingham, thank you very much. It's Birmingham, right in the middle of the country, right there. It's a big industrial city. It's the second largest city in the country after London, which makes it a lot smaller than London because it's a very big, London's a very big city. So just a quick bit of background. I get asked this question all the time. What's the difference between England, Scotland, Ireland, Great Britain, the UK? What do you guys do over there? So here's a map to show you the difference. The UK, the United Kingdom, which is the political entity which I am from, it says it on my old passport, is Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Great Britain is the main island itself, just Scotland, Wales, and England. So that's the difference between all those various entities that you guys probably heard about. It's weird, in the World Cup we're England, in the Olympics we're Great Britain, we're never the UK apart from when we're traveling overseas. If you look at England or Great Britain or the UK even, in comparison with America, it is this size. So for me, when I first came to America, the size of this country is ridiculous, and that was a big shock for me when I first arrived on these shores. This was my childhood. I didn't live in this castle, but we do have lots of castles in England. That is true. This is me on the right, my sister on the left. And this is me when I was 20 years old. This is not my bar, but it is a bar in Cambridge called Parker's Bar, which was always really funny, so we went to have a drink there. This is my sister again. It was this age when I first had my visit to America. So I came to America just before my senior year of college, so I was 20 years old at the time. And I worked in a camp in upstate New York, near to Monticello. Had a wonderful time, met an American girl. And that led to a long-distance relationship, which led to her coming to live in England for a few years, and then eventually me coming to the United States on a green card in 1997. So I actually came here because of the lady that I met. Her family was from Michigan, and I went to graduate school at U of M. And for me, the decision to move here was pretty easy. I was 24, I think, at the time. I was like, sure, I'll move to America, no problem. And then you move to a different country and you lose all of these cultural touchstones that you are used to. So I thought it was going to be easy, but in fact, the first couple of years here was extremely difficult. I missed my family, of course I did, and my friends, but the cultural touchstones were really what got me that I wasn't expecting. So football, the pubs, all those kinds of things, I really missed, and I didn't think that I would. But I really did. Just to clarify, I didn't miss pubs specifically because I like to drink a lot, but in England, pubs are really sort of like the living rooms of communities. And it's where you go to talk to your friends and just to let off steam and those kinds of things. There's no real comparison in terms of establishments here, I don't think, to what pubs mean to the culture in England. So I came here, and then I lived here on my green card for 16 years. This is my green card. It is, in fact, green and a card, which I was quite surprised about when I got it. I was like, wow, it is really a green card. But I lived here for 16 years on that green card. Now, if you live here on a green card, you can't vote. But you do pay taxes, which is taxation without representation, which just, the irony of that still kills me to this day, that I lived here for that long, under those circumstances. But after I'd been here for 11 years, I ended up getting divorced from the person that I moved here with, which threw, for me, lots of different questions up into the air. Where do I live now? Where is my home? I lived here for, most of my 20s and some of my 30s, and so I didn't know what to do because I felt like I really had a foot in two different countries, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that. So I came home, went back home to England for a little while, watched basically every Wimbledon match for the 3 weeks that it's on, just so I could get really English for a while, and thought about what I was going to do. And I wasn't sure, so I came back to the States, back to my house here, and tried to figure it out. Whilst doing that, I met another girl. You may see a theme developing here. And started a new relationship, and that ended up with children. And after that, I basically decided to become a citizen of this country. And I just want to say quickly that to decide to become a citizen of a country is a real privilege, and it's a very powerful act. If you're born somewhere, you're just from there. But if you make the intellectual choice to be a citizen of a country, it affects you in ways that I didn't really think about when I did it. So I primarily became a citizen because I started a family here. This is me getting my citizenship on September the 13th, 2013, so fairly recently. And when that happened to me, they give you a flag. This is the flag I got when I declared my allegiance to the United States. You walk in and there's a flag on every chair, so you can pick it up and wave it around. And you get a citizenship, a certificate of citizenship, and you get a letter from the president. That was pretty cool. But what really surprised me was my feelings about becoming an American citizen. I felt this, in the week after I did it, I felt this big wave of patriotism for a country in which I was not born, which I didn't expect, and it was really surprising to me. Because the citizenship process is kind of, I mean, it's really fun. They played Proud to be an American, or we all picked up our citizenship things, which was really funny to me at the time. But yeah, it was a powerful thing, and I was surprised at that when it happened to me, because I always considered myself as primarily being. My relationship with America changed deeply on the day I became a citizen, which I said surprised me, and that's definitely true. I can now vote, and I didn't vote for many years, and that is a powerful thing. And you know, I definitely consider America my home now. I still go back to England occasionally, but now America is definitely my home. And just to finish, I like Americans so much, I made 2 more of them. And this is my American family, my American wife and my, I guess, half American, half English kids. And that's all I have to say. So.
Thank you very much for coming here to listen to us. I have been thinking of how I was going to present what I consider to be my story as an immigrant to the United States. And let me start by saying that I am a Latina in the United States. And so for some people, that has no connotations. For some people, it has positive connotations. For some people, it has negative connotations. So I have to say that not everybody, but some people, if I say that I am a Latina in the United States, they might think that I am Mexican. They might think that I am undocumented. They might think that I am poorly educated. And they might think that I should go home. Let me just say that I am a US citizen, that I have a PhD, that I graduated with a 3.96 GPA from my PhD, that I have publications in scientific journals, and that I consider myself a proud Latina and US citizen in the United States, a person who pays taxes, who has responsibilities, who supports the local community, who tries to be a good citizen. But I have to say that compared to my colleague here, for whom most of the time people might not question his right to be here, some people question, very often, my right to be here. And so I wanted to start with that, to just dispel a couple of myths. First of all, there are about 50 million people of Latino origin in the United States, but it happens that 70% are here legally. 70% are here documented, either because they were born in the United States, so they are as American as you can be, and that's the majority, that's more than 50%, or there is a percentage of people like me who came to the United States under different circumstances, and through the years became an American citizen, and it took me, I had no problems whatsoever, I had no barriers whatsoever, And it only took me only took me 7 years to become an American citizen. So that my process was the express, super fast process, no problems whatsoever. For some people, it takes many, many more years. And then there's a smaller percentage of Latinos in the United States who are here under temporary status. It can be temporary workers, it can be students, it can be diplomats, but they are still legally here. So about 3 out of 10 Latinos in the United States are here undocumented. So first of all, that's a minority. And second of all, I have met many of them, not many, but some of them here in Burlington, North Carolina. I interviewed about 40 women for a research project that I have. And they are here because they want to feed their children. And they are here because they had a bad situation where they came from, and they could not stand the thought or the idea of sending their children hungry to bed. And so they decided to come, and they cut the grass, they work in construction, they fix the roofs of your houses, they take jobs that were vacant because other people were not taking those jobs. So that, as you can see, I have a very straightforward opinion about the issue of immigration in the United States. The other thing is that if you think back of your families, unless you're 100% Native American, like if you can trace your roots 100% to being a Cherokee or a Seminole, your family is a family of immigrants. You came from somewhere else. Not you maybe, but back in the day, your family came from somewhere else. And so that is also something that I want to put out there, because if you talk to grandparents and maybe your family came from Ireland or Poland or Germany or Italy for sure, and if you have your grandparents alive, they might tell you that when they came or when their parents came, they also faced struggle. Not to mention forced migration to the United States, that's a whole different animal, right? So I just wanted to start with that, and I struggled on how to start with this topic, but I think it's a serious topic, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions, and I think the political environment has increased those political misconceptions. And so I just want to put out there that if you don't remember anything else, 7 out of 10 Latinos in this country are documented, most of them born in the United States, as Americans as anybody can get. So let me go back. I am a Latina in the United States, but I am a privileged Latina in the United States. I was able to come here to study with a Fulbright scholarship. I did my master's many, many years ago. And then that allowed me to later come back to get a PhD. This time I didn't have a scholarship. This time I applied normally, and then I was able to become a a research assistant and a teaching assistant for a college professor. And so that was the way I paid for my tuition. You have to, in those cases, study hard, work hard, because it's about 20 hours of work. But I was very lucky enough that I came as a student. Once I finished my PhD, I had several job offers, and Elon was a great place to work at, and so I ended up choosing coming to Elon. So when people ask me to participate in an activity like this, I almost feel like an imposter, because yes, I am an immigrant, but I didn't have the struggles of many, many immigrants who came now or many years ago. It can be 10 years ago or 200 to this country, and really have had to work very strongly to get the benefits that they have. That also brings me to the topic that we are in a worldwide global economy, where in the same way that goods move around the world, and goods are also produced in some cases where it is cheaper to produce, well, human beings and their talent is also, you can think of that as a product if you want, and this product is also moving around the world to where where it's needed and where the human being knows that he or she might be able to get a better job. And so it's something that you have to think about now that you're college students, that it's not just the United States, it's the whole world, and you are competing against people from all over the world for jobs that might be here in the US, but for jobs that might be somewhere else. So I think that's a trend that is not going to slow down. And so what I'm trying to say here is that you have to think of yourselves as people who are contributing with your knowledge and with your talent, with your work, to a country, but also to a world where not only goods and services move around the world based on the economic needs, but also human beings as well. So if you can have connections or interactions from people with people from other cultures, if you can have study abroad experiences, if you can maybe work for a while somewhere else and maybe later come back to the US, all that enriches, I think, the experience of any college student. Just to tell you very quickly, I am married to a person from East Africa. I am a Catholic, he is a Muslim. I am Latina, but I'm white, he's black. When I told this to my family in Costa Rica, there was a silence. And then only my brother asked, does he eat meat? Which I thought was the most silly question he could have asked under the circumstances. But the world is changing, so things are less conventional, and I think families are also becoming less conventional. So I am a Latina in the United States. I am a privileged Latina in the United States. My husband is from another continent, from another religion, and I consider myself very, very lucky because of the circumstances in which I came here. All my family is in Costa Rica, well, except for my husband, so I travel because I can. I have a US citizenship, so I can travel back and forth. Many immigrants don't have the chance, but I visit my family frequently. They come and visit me, and I am proud to be a Costa Rican, and I am also proud to be an American citizen since December 2013. That doesn't take away my Latina persona, but it brings another source of pride, and I really am proud of being part of this country. But that doesn't mean that I get rid of my roots. It's just I consider myself kind of a transnational human being in the sense that I'm here, but I'm also connected there. And so let me stop there, and maybe we can.
So, good morning, and thank you for coming today. My name is Ahmed Fadaam, and I'm from Iraq. I'm guessing that many of you know. It says on. It's on. Hello? Yeah. So, I'm guessing that many of you know about this country. Do you know about Iraq? What do you know about Iraq? Come on, tell me. You know, the 2003 war, the invasion, Saddam Hussein, the Sunni Shiites, Al-Qaeda, all of these things. So, let me tell you about my life in Iraq. I was born in 1967 in Baghdad, and I lived most of my life in Iraq. I never left until 2008. This was the first time for me to leave my country. I never thought about leaving the country ever, or moving to live into another country. Iraq was ruled by a ruthless dictator, and the Arab Ba'ath Socialist Party, the famous Ba'ath Party. And Iraq has been into several wars, 8 long years with Iran, and then the invasion of Kuwait in 1990, and then the Desert Storm that happened in 1991, and then we lived for 13 years under sanctions. And then we had the 2003 invasion. So I witnessed several wars through my life. And I must say that before 2003, life was somehow good. And some of you may say, how can you say this? You've been ruled by a dictator, Saddam Hussein, who killed thousands of people. And yes, we were ruled by this dictator for so many years, and he killed thousands of Iraqis in his absurd wars. And he ruled the country with an iron fist, with fear. And we didn't have the right to express ourselves, but we had something that we started missing after 2003. Security. Something that we didn't value until the invasion in 2003 happened. We all long for the day when we see Saddam is gone, when we see him standing in a cage, answering for all of the crimes that he committed against the Iraqis. And we thought that the 2003 war is going to be the best war that we ever had, because this is going to save us from Saddam Hussein. And we're going to be free, and we're going to have a better future for us and for our children. Unfortunately, this wasn't what we expected. What happened after the toppling of Saddam Hussein was something that we never expected. The people got divided, Sunnis and Shiites, and they started fighting with each other. The Shiites said that they are the majority. The Sunnis said that we ruled the country for 35 years and we still have the right to do so. And now people are just killing each other. Also, there are some people who consider the invasion as an occupation and they needed to fight against it. So now we have armed groups fighting against the American forces in Iraq. And the fighting can happen at any place, sometimes even across the street from where you live. You don't know what's going to happen throughout the day. I used to leave home, kiss my kids goodbye because I don't know if I'm going to come back or not. And I used to drive to work, go through at least 11 or 13 checkpoints. And in these checkpoints, I don't know if the soldiers are going to be Sunnis or Shiites, and if they're going to ask me for my ID. Because during the sectarian war in Iraq, people were killed just because they had the wrong name. If your name, for example, is Ali or Sajjad or Amir, then you're a Shia. If your name is Marwan or Abu Bakr or Umar, then you're a Sunni. And if they find out that you are from the other sect, then you're dead. And while I'm driving, I don't know if the car next to me is going to be a car bomb that will explode and kill everyone. I don't know if someone's going to open the door of my car and put a bullet in my head. I don't know what's going to happen if I drive too close to an American convoy or to an Iraqi army convoy. I had to change about 4 cars because my cars were shot several times by soldiers just because I was driving too close. Besides that, we had a high rate of crime in Iraq also that started after 2000. There is no law anymore, there is no order anymore. It's not the same country that was ruled by an iron fist. Now we have freedom. People can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, they interpreted freedom in a very wrong way. They thought that they could do whatever they want and settle their problems in any meaning they like. I remember my kids used to tell me stories about their friends who were kidnapped from school just for ransom. I had several friends who were kidnapped and killed. And I don't know what, we never found any trace of them. One of them was a former colleague of mine who worked for France Press. He was kidnapped after he left the office. This was in April 2006. And until today, we never found his body. We don't know what happened with him. My kids used to come back from school early, like 10 o'clock or 10:30 in the morning, and I asked them, why did you come back? And they said, oh, they found an IED in our class. Or a militia got into fight with the American forces or with another armed group in the street where our school is, and we had to be sent back home. So now, how can you live in a place like this? And still, I wasn't thinking about leaving. This is my home, this is my country, these are my people. And I still have hope that things will get better. I forgot to tell you that I'm originally an artist, I'm a sculptor, and I have a PhD in arts from the University of Baghdad. And I used to teach in the art school there. And this was until 2003 when the war happened. My studio, my school was burned and looted just like any other government building. So I had to find me another job. And I speak English, so I used this to work as an interpreter with the media. I started with WBUR radio station, then with AFP, Agence France Presse, it's a French news agency, for almost 3 years. And my job back then was to report about explosions and kidnappings and gunfights happening in Baghdad. And I can say that I've seen a huge number of dead bodies. I literally walked over dead bodies. Before 2003, I used to faint if I see blood. After 2003, I remember one time an explosion happened against the Red Crescent building in central Baghdad. Some guy drove an ambulance full with bombs and blew the whole place up and killed about 70 people. It was the first day of Ramadan. As you know, we Muslims, we fast with Ramadan. And I was fasting. And my job was to go to the main hospital in Baghdad, stand in front of the gate and wait for ambulances to come and count the dead bodies. So I had a piece of paper with me and I would count 1, 2, 3, 4. One head, half a torso, legs, and so on. We became either numb, we didn't, we forgot what death means. It became part of our life. I can say it became part of our family, because every family in Baghdad had lost a person or two. I lost several of my brothers and my friends. And still, I was accepting it. 2006, I got a death threat, and I had to send my family out of Iraq to Syria. And I remained in Baghdad waiting for whatever is going to happen to me. I moved from Agence France to work for the New York Times. In Baghdad, I became the newsroom chief after several months. But still, about a year later, I got my second death threat. and this time I had to leave the country. Some of my friends here in the United States managed to get me an invitation to come to the United States as a visiting scholar at UNC Chapel Hill. On the airplane, and before we landed JFK, I was thinking to myself, well, first of all, I'm an Arab, and a Muslim, and a Sunni, and an Iraqi. It's a great combination for a terrorist, right? And I was wondering how people would look at me here in the United States. And when we arrived to JFK, the officer at the immigration office said that since I'm from the Middle East and this is my first time to the United States, then I should go to the other booth where there's an officer whose duty is to deal with cases like me. And I said, but I speak English. And he said, never mind, you should go there. I went to the other booth, and there was an officer sitting there, and he had a long beard. And I said, good morning, and I looked at his tag, and I read his name. It's an Arab name. And then I changed my language, and I said, Salam alaikum, and he said, alaikum salam, in Arabic. From his accent, I recognized him as maybe Lebanese or Jordanian. And I said, well, he's a brother. He's going to help me. So I gave him my passport, and he said, go and sit over there and wait until I call your name. So I went to, sat on the bench, and I kept waiting. And after an hour, I went back to him and I said, sir, I'm going to be late for my flight to North Carolina. And he said, it's okay, just wait. And after another hour, I went back to him and said, please, sir, can you hurry up? And he said, go back to your seat. And in the meantime, there were many people, like from Egypt or Nigeria or other places, who came and waited for 2-3 minutes, and he just finished their passport and sent them away. And I was sitting for 3 hours, and I lost my flight. And after 3 hours, he just stood up, he took his jacket, and he said, I'm off for today. And he left my passport on the desk. I left. And I was just sitting there, and I didn't know what was going to happen, or where to go, or who to talk to. This is my first time in the country, I don't know anyone. Then an American officer came like 10 minutes later. He went inside the booth, he saw my passport, and he read the Republic of Iraq. He saw my picture, and he came straight to me. He was an American. And he said, in Arabic, Ahlan wa sahlan fi America, welcome to America. And I told him about what happened to me with the other officer, and he apologized. And in just 3 minutes, he just signed my passport, stamped it, and gave it to me and said, please go and catch up. After that, whenever I go to, everywhere I go, and whenever I introduce myself as an Iraqi, people would say that they're sorry about what happened to my country and how they tried to stop the war, and they didn't agree with what the Bush administration had done to Iraq. When I came to North Carolina, people were so generous, they were so suspectful. I hardly had lunch or dinner in my apartment back then because I was invited to so many places, so many houses where people showed me warmth and generosity. I had to go back to Iraq in 2009 because my family was still in Syria. I was hoping that things have changed, but then I decided that I'm not going to be staying here. If it's not for me, then for the sake of my children. So I applied for immigration through the International Organization for Migration. And I had to wait 3.5 years to get my immigration visa and come here to the United States as a refugee. We left in August 2012, and just a few days after we arrived, I heard that a car bomb exploded in front of the ice cream shop where my kids used to go every day, and killed almost 30 kids. Back then, I had some doubts inside of me. I should have stayed. It's my country. It's my home. But after I heard about the incident, I realized that I made a good decision, at least to save my family and my kids. We've been here for 4 years, and whenever I ask my kids if they want to go back to Baghdad, they would say no, we're not going back. And I ask them why, and they say that the only thing that we remember about Baghdad is death and violence. And all what we have found here is peace, love, and generosity. So this is our home. Thank you so much.
Yes, I am a United States citizen. I'm an old white male, so I don't have stories to tell about myself. But I do want to introduce some people that I met during the research that I'm doing in the west of London in a community called Southall. And I'm working with women, South Asian women, Somalian women, and their efforts and ability to achieve resistance and independence within quite patriarchal cultures and communities. And I would like to introduce, hopefully within 10 minutes, at least a couple of different women, because I'd like you to hear two different kinds of stories. And one of the women I'd like to introduce you to is Pregnant Patel. And she was actually born in Kenya. Her parents worked in Kenya in East Africa, which was quite common for Indians and during the period from just after the war to the 1990s, because there were good jobs there in the development of Africa. And it wasn't until the kind of Africanist movement and independence of Africa that many of these Indians were asked to leave. And so Pregnant's parents then moved to near Southall in West London. This was before kind of the multicultural policy in the UK at that time. And she found a lot of prejudice, very open prejudice in the school system there. She felt particularly othered, and even more so, as she puts in her own words, than, say, the African Caribbean students. And there's a large African Caribbean student population in this community. But she persisted, and she got involved in the theater crew. She tried to make things work for herself. Believe it or not, she found some kind of solace within British literature, and particularly James Joyce, who was espousing this kind of independence, and also reading about Gandhi, obviously, as a very important voice for Indians. On her 16th birthday, her parents took her to India. She had never been there before. And when she saw the poverty there and the oppression of women, she was deeply moved by that. But little did she know, even though her parents were fairly liberal, that they were arranged in a marriage for her, and she would have none of it. And if you know Pregnant, she was very adamant about that. And so she became even more independent and from her parents because of that. She found also in the school system that they were really training South Asians and counseling them not to have very high aspirations, to preparing them for marriage, preparing them to work as laborers, and to work at Heathrow Airport. And Heathrow Airport is just minutes away from Southall. And it was a place where South Asians could find employment. So there were those kinds of limitations. And she and one other South Asian student in this school were the only two to go on to college. And she went to university in Liverpool. There she studied social studies, and she was very aware of some of the movements, some of the kind of radical movements that were happening, particularly in London. This was the time of the Thatcher administration, against oppression of minorities, particularly Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. And the first thing that she wanted to do when she left university was to become a part of these movements, to join up with activist groups. And when she did graduate, she came back to Southall and joined several groups, including a group that I'm very familiar with, and that's the Southall Black Sisters. And she worked hard for that group, soon becoming director, and changing the focus of the group from race and ethnicity to gender, because she saw a great deal of oppression of women within these highly patriarchal kinds of cultures. One of the kind of outstanding events that happened in Southall, and this was just at the time she was becoming involved with the Southall Black Sisters, was when the BNP, the British National Party, which is a neo-fascist party, was planning to have a rally and a conference in Southall. And the reason they were doing that is they really wanted to provoke the community and to kind of confront them with their white supremacism. The City of London sent out 3,000 police, and no one was sure what the police were there for, whether to protect the BNP or the people of Southall, because they knew things were going to happen. And one thing that did happen is one of the anti-fascist demonstrators was killed, and that created this kind of really a galvanic movement within Southall among South Asians, among African Caribbeans and Somalians to unite and to make changes in the community. So now, as I say, Pregnant is director of the Southall Black Sisters. She is internationally known in terms of her efforts to protect women from violence in the community. And she is a very ardent feminist and has written a number of books and articles and is asked to speak all around the country. So that's a case of someone coming from this kind of oppressive environment and really becoming a model for a progressive movement. Another person I would like to talk about is Drinka Bravo. And Drinka comes from Sarajevo in Bosnia. She grew up there. Her mother early on really required them to move into this 12-story concrete building that was new there because it was concrete and would protect them from the bombs that were going on outside. It also had central heat, which very few buildings at that time had. Very cold there. She also remembers times when, because of the snipers, they had to stay inside in their flat for weeks at a time. Later, when she graduated, she became a reporter, and she reported the Bosnian War of 1990, also helping other reporters to report and make films about it. And she said it was 12 to 15 hours a day of bombing and violence that she experienced. It was very traumatic. And then she said when she would go home at night, there was bombing and violence as well. And so in 1993, she sought asylum in the UK. And it took her 3 years to achieve that. So now she is a citizen of the UK. And she is now one of the leading advocates for migrants and asylum seekers in the UK. And that's what she devotes her life to right now. She's an amazing woman, and again, a very radical feminist. Do I have any more time? A couple minutes, okay. And through this project, I also am in conversation with women and how they achieve independence. And so I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about a single mother and her daughter who are Pakistani, they're Muslim, and they do not wear hijab or any kind of covering whatsoever, very kind of modern clothing. They told me that they are Islam is a very important part of their lives, but they never go to the mosque. That they are very secular in many ways. She told me, and I'm not going to tell you their names just for reasons of privacy, but she told me this wonderful story. And everyone that I talk about here, when I asked them, how do you identify yourself, they said, we identify as British. And very outwardly, they identify themselves as British. And I thought that was very interesting. And the mother and daughter that I was talking to, the mother told me the story in terms of how that became clear to her. She went back to Pakistan to a wedding that was happening in her family. And she said that families are very close there, and perhaps too close. She said day and night she was with her family, and they were talking all the time, and she had no room of her own to be by herself. And she said she was in bed one night reading when one of her aunties came in, jumped in bed with her, and wanted to talk all night about the family and things that were going on in Pakistan. And she said, finally she had to tell her to leave, and she said, I realize I'm British because I like privacy, as they say. I needed my time away from people. And I thought that was kind of an interesting revelation for her to understand in one way that she was very British. So.
So part of this core forum as well is highlighting some of the striking differences between migrants, and I think that this slideshow will be fairly different from Carmen's story. So I come from Canada, and just in case you didn't know where it is, here it is. This is what it looks like. What I really like about this map is that as a Canadian, it treats the United States the way that most Canadians are used to being treated on maps, which is something like this, where if we're lucky, we get to be the big blob on top of the United States, but oftentimes we just disappear. So there's Canada again. So I wanted to not speak for all Canadians, I'm only one person, but give you at least a sense of culturally what it's like to be a Canadian in relation to the US, and give you some sort of general statements about that. So first, when I was in high school learning about Canadian history, I was taught that Canada has a special relationship with the US. And that meant things like that we have specific trade agreements, like the North American Free Trade Agreement, that we have the longest undefended border that we share, that Canadians when coming to the US and Americans when coming to Canada have to go through sort of a smaller immigration process in terms of just crossing the border as a tourist. So we're taught this idea of special relationship as something that perhaps these two countries share. We're also cultured to see ourselves as very different, or to constantly reinforce the idea for the rest of the world that, no, I'm not an American, I'm Canadian. And to really highlight those differences, whether that's wearing the Canadian flag on a backpack when we're traveling, or educating people to say, culturally we are actually, this is Canada, or reminding people we're Canadian. So that seems to be something typical of our country. Certainly there's a lot of stereotypes about Canadians, and I just said about, and that might trigger something for you, but I think that I'm not going to get into those stereotypes right now, but just to know that as a Canadian, there's a distinct relationship to the United States specifically that's different from immigrating to other parts of the world, I would say. So where did I grow up? I grew up in Montreal, or I was born in Montreal, and then my parents moved to Manitoba, where I grew up living in a small town called Pinawa. And from there, I went and did my undergraduate degree at a university called Queen's in Kingston, Ontario, and then decided to do a master's and a PhD in music theory in Vancouver at the University of British Columbia. So I moved around a fair bit. When I was doing my master's, between my master's and my PhD, I took a year off and traveled to Nicaragua, where I met a guy and came back to Canada and went through a long immigration process with him to bring him to Canada. So I'm not going to speak too much about that, but it is important to my story to know that I married a Nicaraguan and then he eventually lived with me in Vancouver. So we were living there. I graduated in 2011 and then started to look for work. And as a PhD graduate in music theory, your work prospects are relatively limited. I was lucky that I didn't have a lot of debt at all and was simply just looking for jobs. But most universities in Canada, if they have a music department, will have maybe one music theorist. So the chances of me finding a job in Canada were pretty slim. The United States, on the other hand, was appealing because there's tons of small colleges, tons of music departments, really big research institutions, small liberal arts places. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll apply in the US. And I got lucky. Elon called me up and said, hey, we'd love to have you on campus. And I said, okay. I came to North Carolina for the very first time ever. In spring of 2013. That went well. Here I am, obviously. So I decided, so I visited Elon, and there's the Center for the Arts, which you may not even know exists, but here it is, the beautiful Center for the Arts at Elon. So came here, did a campus visit, and was subsequently hired. So the process I went through at that point, I applied, or I had to get what's called an H-1B visa. So to work in the US as a Canadian citizen, this visa category is for people who want to work in a specialty occupation. And that can be anything from an actor or a hockey player to, in my case, somebody with advanced degrees in a specialized field. Because Elon has Francois Masuka, who works in the Global Education Center, I had somebody on campus whose job it was to help me get this H-1B visa. So I sent him a copy of my PhD diploma, CV, scans of my passport, and a transcript. And then he needed that to take that information and prove to the US government that I was, first of all, a specialist, hence the PhD, but also that there was no American qualified to get the job that I was going for, that I was the absolute best, and that any American they could have picked wouldn't have been as good as me. So he managed to do that. He also helped me fill out some very confusing forms. Elon paid for all the documentation and all the filings related to my visa, which came to about $2,000. So that was easy, but then I had to figure out how to get my husband and son visas. My son was Canadian, and so he could enter the US with his passport, but initially no more than 6 months. My husband was Nicaraguan, and he had a tourist visa to the US that we'd already applied for, but again, he couldn't stay longer than 6 months. So we had to apply for H-4 visas for them so that they could accompany me, but they couldn't work. And we had a really hard time trying to figure out how to get those visas, whether we could just show up at the border or whether we had to go to the embassy. In the end, we went to the US consulate in Vancouver, waited for 4 hours in a hot room with no food or drink with a 2-year-old, and then finally managed to get the H-4 visas for them. And then we crossed the border, moved down to Elon in August 2013. Into this giant house with our 2 suitcases. We did get some more furniture at some point, and there's my son outside our rental house. So we arrived, and we initially had a fair bit of culture shock. I'd never been to the South before, none of us had been here. Also, we were constantly told by locals that, oh, you're from Canada, you're gonna love the winters here. And then we found that was our first winter. This is all before most of your time, but in the winter of 2013-14, there was an ice storm that lasted 3 days, and we lost power for those 3 days. And that's Belk Pavilion with a tree in the roof that fell over. So we didn't really believe everyone who said that the weather was better here. Vancouver had tulips, and that was nice. But we also had some issues with figuring out how to do taxes because my husband, by the time we came, he was Canadian, but he still couldn't apply for jobs here under his visa category. So we had to get him what's called gosh, I don't even know what it stands for, but it's an ITIN, which is a tax identification number that you can get when you're not allowed to apply for a social. And it took us a year of mailing all the required documents to the IRS, only to have them returned to us, being told they were insufficient. And then we'd mail the same ones, and then they'd send them back, and then the same ones send them back. And maybe like a year and a half after we started this process, got an advocate who took another year, and finally we got him this ITIN so that I could actually declare him as my dependent because he couldn't work. So that was interesting. Other things in terms of immigration, once I'd arrived at Elon, Elon had 18 months in which to start the process for a green card. So the H-1B visa lasts for 3 years, and you can reapply for another 3. But Elon was obligated, as I understand it, to actually go ahead and start the green card process. So I met with Francois again, and he set everything up for me, gave me the forms, put in little sticky notes to tell me, sign this here, put this information here. He also had a lawyer that he worked with. So Elon, again, paid for part of my filing. And then for my husband and son, we paid for that, and we also paid the lawyer to do some of the remaining documents and to fill out the paperwork for us. So basically, we paid for green cards, and we got them. The hardest part of it was probably having to drive down, it was having to do medical appointments. So as part of the permanent resident process, we had to go to a specific doctor in Chapel Hill and get various blood work samples. We had to prove that we didn't have syphilis and TB. Those were the two that were really an issue. Yeah, we didn't even have to do that. So try to convince their now 3-year-old son that shots are a really exciting thing, and he didn't really buy that. But other than that, pretty much paid somebody to do all the work for us. And in November of 2015, basically 3 years after we arrived, we had our permanent residency. So now I still can't vote. I can't serve in the military. I don't think I could be a police officer, but I can do anything else I want. When I had an H-1B visa, I could only work for Elon. No, I couldn't accept money from anybody else legally, and now I can work for whoever I want. And my husband can also work. When we travel abroad, we go into the US citizen line. The customs officers say, welcome back. We own a house in Burlington. Our kids are in school. We have lots of friends and acquaintances, and we can work and study anywhere. But in all honesty, I'm not sure that we really feel home until we go to either Nicaragua or to Canada. I think it's interesting, having now witnessed all 4 of these sessions, and you've heard Dr. Monaco's story as well, I can pass for an American very easily. People around in the South will think, oh, she's from, she's a Northerner or something. I'm white, I got blue eyes and light hair. My husband is Latino, and he was standing on our front lawn with our 2 children last summer when a pickup truck drove by, and the man yelled, "Go home, effing Mexican." And so I think that that's an interesting part of our story, to be here in this country. That I can pass for an American if I want to. I still feel the Canadianness welling up in me. My fellow Core Forum teachers will ask me, what do you think of the elections in Canada? And I want to move to your country. And when I'm spelling, but at the same time I can pass for an American by spelling the last letters of the alphabet XYZ, or asking where the restroom is rather than where the washroom is. So I'm feeling, in terms of my own settlement as an immigrant, that I'm not really sure where's home right now. When I'm abroad, I feel like I'm away from home if I'm not with my family. When I'm at home in Burlington, I feel like I miss my countries. So I think this picture of us in the airport kind of sums up probably the state that I exist in a good chunk of the time. And that's my story.